When I first saw the accusation being thrown around that Classic Lara specifically is a Mary Sue character, I'll be honest, I wasn't really too clear on what a Mary Sue even is. I'd heard of it, of course, but I hadn't really thought too much about it or looked into it at all, until a friend of mine put me onto this absolutely excellent video about the Mary Sue archetype. I'll link it in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out before you carry on here, but in case you don't, let's go over what makes a character a Mary Sue. Contrary to popular belief, a Mary Sue isn't just any female character who's good at stuff, or just any author insert character. They're a bit more fiddly to define than that. Mary Sue is a character of any gender that's too good and too important, to the point of sucking in the rest of the story and universe around them. They leave no room for other characters to have any sort of development, and the plot only happens to them, or because of them. Because they're not just the hero of the story, they're the center of the universe. I think Jack from Lost is my favorite example of this, and honestly, figuring out that he's a Mary Sue has really helped me pinpoint why I dislike him so much. He's absolutely the worst kind of protagonist, especially in a show that was initially written to be about a large cast of people, all from completely different backgrounds and all of whom were supposed to be the hero of their own story. Unless the rich white guy doctor is on screen, then everything becomes about him. The men all answer to him, the women all fancy him. Even when he's acting like a complete dickhead, which is very often, he always gets a pass because he's a good guy and everyone just likes him so much. Originally, he was supposed to be killed off in the second episode, but the writers liked him so much they decided to keep him in and make him the hero. The little bitch Mary Sue'd so hard that he even Mary Sue'd his actual creators. Whoops, got distracted a bit there, but you get the point, right? A Mary Sue is a character who only exists to be the best. Not for any justifiable reason, they just are, and the rest of their character, if they have one, which they usually don't, and also the story itself revolves around them being the best. So what about Lara? Actually, before I go any further, I'd just like to point out how interesting it is that Classic Lara haters think she has both no personality and the personality of a Mary Sue. Like, how can a thing be a certain way if that thing doesn't even exist? That just makes no sense. Anyway, she does have a personality, there's no point pretending otherwise, and do I really need to explain how and why the above definition of a Mary Sue doesn't apply? She is the hero, sure, and I guess you could say she's at the front and center of the story, but that's more by virtue of her being the player character in a video game. Of course she's going to be on screen most of the time. That's not the same thing as her being the center of the universe. It's true that Lara's usually the catalyst of the story, for example Natla and Dr. Willard sending her on a crazy dangerous fetch quest, but they chose her because that's the sort of thing she's good at. There's actually a reason for it. And when she yoinks the Amulet of Horus without thinking and accidentally causes the end of the world, she's the one who has to go and fix it because, again, that's her jam. It was her mess to clean up, and also, that's the game. Nobody, not the writers, not the other characters, not the world, not the story itself, is under any impression that everything is all about Lara. And although I would usually argue until the ends of the earth that Lara has plenty of personality in the classic games, I don't think that there was enough character stuff happening from anyone for it to really count in this instance. There were plenty of good characters, definitely, but the purpose of them being there was to serve the story, which in turn was there to drive the gameplay, because the gameplay was the point. They weren't trying to be character pieces, they weren't trying to be films, they were video games. Doy. You know which Tomb Raider games were trying to be character pieces though? Oh yeah, it's that time. Let's go. Actually, I don't even know what to say about Reboot Lara. I've talked way too much already about how badly written she and her games are, and anyone who's played them can see that for themselves anyway. They tried so hard to make a character-driven narrative, scrapping everything that made Tomb Raider good in the first place, gameplay, level design, plot, in an attempt to make everything all about Lara, and that was their fatal flaw. Starting with the idea that your character is the best and working outwards from there is never going to result in an interesting story because, congrats, you've just created a Mary Sue. And that's what Reboot Lara is, there's no getting around it. The Reboot trilogy wasn't made because Crystal Dynamics wanted to make new and interesting games. It wasn't because they wanted to write new and interesting stories. They made the Reboot trilogy because they wanted to showcase their new Lara. That's all, and they know it too. The story only exists to serve Lara. The other characters are only there for Lara to rescue, or to rescue Lara, or to die so Lara can be sad, or some combination thereof. Nobody other than Lara ever has any kind of growth or character arc. Nothing in the story happens that doesn't involve Lara. The only thing that happens that's handled with a little bit of maturity is when Unuratu dies and Lara has to bring the news to her son, but then it immediately goes back by making him give Lara half of the Savior's amulet. I mean, sure, there's a reason for it in the story, kinda, but that's not really the issue. The Mary Sue problem doesn't begin at a story level, it stems from having a flawed starting point that your whole project is built around. Which is why occasionally having other characters telling Mary Sue that not everything is about her
Not everything is about you!
doesn't make her any less of a Mary Sue. And even if it did, she doesn't learn anything from it anyway, she just gets upset and we're supposed to feel sorry for her, so what's the point? And it gets worse outside of the games too. Well, okay, I'm only assuming it does based on one comic book I accidentally stumbled across and had to finish reading out of morbid curiosity. But I can't not call out this absolute cringe fest about Lara's appearance in Pride and Prejudice. She volunteers for this thing because of Jonah, but she's making a mess of it because
I can't act. I just can't act.
Yes, that wasn't great, was it?
and the lead actress, Andrea, hates her for it. So she invites Andrea out for drinks, and then, would you believe it, Andrea wanted to be an archaeologist too, so they're immediately friends now. But uh-oh, on their way home they get mugged, but yay, Lara beats the shit out of them. But uh-oh again, she was too good at fighting, which frightens Andrea and she quits the play. Oops. And then, for some fucking reason, Jonah gives Lara the lead role even though they all know she's shit. And then, while she's enjoying a round of good old-fashioned "you can do this, Lara's," she gets a sort of ransom note from some guy who's kidnapped her friend Kaz, so she takes off, still in her costume, to rescue her. After a nice bit of need to do this and got to do that, she reaches the bad guys and fights them all off with the help of this mysterious man who's been following her throughout the story. And then, in this moment of absolute insanity, he tries to convince her to join Trinity, and when she says no, he fucking throws himself in front of a train. I mean, what the hell's the point of this? And then in the final scene, she has this revelation where she suddenly understands Jane Austen, and that makes her good at acting.
Yes! You found the truth! You're an actor now!
Why is this story a thing? Do I even need to explain what a disaster piece this is? Who the heck thought this was good enough to publish? I mean, I would've lapped that shit up when I was 10. Wow, so cool! She fights off the bad guys in her olden days costume, and then they give her a lead role and she does a great job! Wow! It's like that scene in Brooklyn Nine-Nine where Amy dramatically chases and arrests a guy while trying on a wedding dress, except instead of it being a means for Amy to show her strength and worth and to overcome her self-doubt about her new position and fear of sexist backlash, it was just the writers showing off how cool their character is. And also if, instead of it being a 30-second scene, it was the entire episode, it's just embarrassing. And it really underlines the Mary Sue thing. Like the actual games, the only reason this thing exists is to show off the character. Which, again, it's fine to have a hero or a protagonist, that's not the problem. It's that nothing else has any substance except for Lara. Jonah's only purpose in this is to show Lara's loyalty to her friends. Sam does nothing except tell Lara how great she is. Kaz is just there to get kidnapped so Lara can rescue her. Andrea kind of has a purpose, story-wise, but she's still entirely reactionary to Lara. I don't know what this guy's deal is. I assume there must be more to him in the other comics, but for this, as a self-contained story, he's just what the fuck. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. I'll just remove myself from your universe now. Bye. Do you see what I mean? Everything in the universe centers around Lara. This was not the case in the classic games. Although, since we're now getting unified Lara, I guess you could argue that if Reboot Lara is a Mary Sue, then classic Lara must be as well, going forward. Unless, of course, they get new writers on board for the unification, which I really hope they will, even though I don't particularly believe it. If they would just cool it on trying to tell us how fantastic their new character is, and instead put that effort into actually making her a good character, through things like convincing dialogue, better voice acting, and for God's sake a strong supporting cast, people would be way more inclined to like her. It doesn't matter what outfit she wears, what weapon she uses, the next game is going to be every bit as terrible as the reboot trilogy if they carry on refusing to hire competent writers. As long as the Tomb Raider writing team consists of those same old guys who were only interested in hyping up their character and slagging off the original one, things aren't going to get any better, and we're never going to get anything other than a straight up Mary Sue.